Sorry about that. I got cut off. This is part two of spiritual warfare attack and techniques. I left off at possession of skills or abilities, ego tellers, being able to tell the difference of your personality shift or different egos and mentalities that might become attachments or attunements to your individual. Uh, and like I said, they offer certain kind of skills and attributes, possession qualities, and if you start getting into things like uh like with if you work with your chakras and know spiritual centers and have a knowledge of different skills and abilities that you can do, um then those are spiritual guided centers of your own, and those are you can develop those on your own, etc. Some kind of electrokinesis, or chi foundation. But if you start getting into real dark stuff, which I would suggest not to, I never ever saw any kind of power at all. I never wanted any kind of power. I didn't want anything to do with it because it's easily corruptible, and it's easily abusive, and it's a good way to get yourself in some real dark stuff, and it's just not, it's unwanted. But like I said, ego tellers and possession and skills and abilities will lead you to characterization or personality tweak and attributes. And characterization is maybe you jump into a different kind of character within your mind, and you might run with this character or build this ego up, but you stay stuck in that character, and you, without knowing it, and you take on a different persona, and then later on the line you're like, well, who am I now? Like, what just happened? It's a tweak and an attunement of one of their characters. That leads me into character and tweak and attunement. I met this girl when I was away. She was a Wiccan. She was a witch, and we had a minute relationship, but I had witnessed her character switch day to day, and she was aware of her demons and her entities that were within her, and she was okay with it. In fact, there were too many of her to know. I could just watch through my own observance and just trying to understand or unveil a character, what was an attribute and what was an attunement, and the character change within her. And there might be a voice change or an attribute change or a consistent way of something, like maybe a finger tap and a consistency, like that might occur often, that is just noticeable, and then it would completely stop the next day, and then something else would happen, like a consistent eating of apples, or a consistent just something that happens with a character switch, and an attunement. And she was spiritual and magical at the same time. She did different kinds of magic that I had witnessed, and I was just like, oh, that's just not cool. That's just like really, really weird stuff. But like I said, I've seen a lot of things in my spiritual adventure that most people will probably never ever believe, which leads me into animal spirits. Now, animal spirits are different than animal spirit guides. Animal spirit guides are if you see something and you're like, oh, that's an omen, or that's a spirit animal, which something that might have meaning to you. Like, say you see a raccoon 3 times in a row, you're like, oh my God, there's a spirit guide, and that's a sign. And then you start looking into it. What is it, and what does it mean? What's the meaning behind it? You know, people look for synchronicities and things like that. Spirit animals are different because these are spiritual demon animals. And like I said, this girl that I witnessed, she was possessed by a lot of spirits and demons at the same time. And I witnessed her transform into a bat, but not physically. I'm talking internally. She started to cringe on her. She started to go inward and cringe on herself, and move into like a downward hawk-like position. And she was hissing violently. And I knew it wasn't a fabrication after spending some time with the person that I had witnessed it, and I realized that it was a bat because I looked at it and I could see. And if you've been able to lift the veil and can look into eyes, sometimes you can see things that are different aspects of the character. And so what I without hesitation, because I didn't know what could have happened, I put the symbol of a cross on her third eye, and she laid down and went to sleep. And I stayed there for a second to see if it was a joke, but she was out cold. And I walked away, and I came back a little while later, and she was still out. And then after some time, she woke up and she was mad at me. She was like, "No one can do that but a priest." Da 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 da. And this was around the time when I was equipping myself with spiritual practices and fundamentals, because I don't want that shit near me. But I was still in communication, connection with her, because I mean, people are still people. It just, we didn't have any ill will towards each other. So as far as I'm concerned, there's a whole community of people out there. And it depends on what your practice is. And mine is spiritual upheaval. I'm trying to better myself. I'm trying to find a peace, love, and harmony kind of way of life, and a lot of that's done through spirituality and whatever religion you're in. Me, it's Christianity. And like I said, I also seen her. I have seen a wolf character come out of her, where she bent over and she was heaving like a wolf, but it was an inward breath, like when a wolf is getting ready to howl and it's breathing, and you know that it's coming from the inward of their chest, and it's a toxic chemical. What is happening is a toxic chemical is within their chest, which is releasing a howl. That is what occurs. Maybe, I don't know exactly what it is. Maybe it's a heat. Maybe it's an adrenaline rush of some kind. But I seen this transfiguration occur, and I was like, holy shit, this shit is just real, because the howl was just repetitious, and at that point I was like, I don't know what the fuck I'm in. But that goes without saying. I didn't seem to get into any trouble or any harm. Eventually our communication ended, and I never heard from person again. But like I said, I've seen a lot of things within spiritual communities and magical communities of people who do things without even knowing what they're doing, and they have different spiritual magical attributes. And that's the thing, there's a lot of things that happen that we do that we just are not aware of, which are attachment attunements of spirit guides or demons or entities or different beings that are characterizations or little tweaks that enhance it. And especially since the Waterman came in and we moved into a new age, a lot of people have been upgrading and becoming more spiritually founded, and the unveiling of mass surplus of knowledges, and people doing just a lot of things to better themselves, and some to worsen themselves. And like I said, I woke up violently 6 years ago, and if it weren't for my wanting to get better, I would not have made it. I would have not have made it out, or to be whole, kind of. But okay. So now we're getting into false love. False love is a being or some kind of entity that will pretend to love you, or there might be a spirit in your eye that it might be a spirit of some kind, or an image in your eye that is drawing you in and telling you, they love you, or that you might hear a voice. And it depends on your level of trust. Like, I've seen in mine eye a writing, "I love you," and then upon further analysis, it would become corrupt, and it would say some pretty negative things that would be abusive, and it would have to be pushed out. But I also have heard a spirit or some sort of angelic being tell me that they love me, and I believed it, because there was a knowing, and in spiritual psychic phenomena, it's called cognizance, just a feeling of knowing, a feeling of knowing. So beware of false love and entities trying to lure you in with such a word, because in a world like this, I mean, it's easy to be mesmerized by spirituality and things like this, and you have to be careful of what you're talking to, and how far involved you want to get in with their guidance or their powers, or their just whatever it is they're trying to do. This is where an area where a lot of psychics work, and a lot of clairvoyance and clairaudience, and you might go to psychic tellers and you're like, I don't believe them, but you know what I mean, they have fallen in love with their power, and they might believe that the entity loves them, but in the exchange, they're doing dark practices, and it's weighing heavy on their spirit, on their karma. It becomes sin. In the Bible, that's an evil practice. I'm not here to talk about or try to convert anybody to any kind of religion, but in most religions, there's usually a guideline or a allowance of what is and what is acceptable within their doctrine, for as far as spiritual practices are concerned. So I talked about. Okay. This is one. If you're in communication, or you have knowledge, or we're talking with beings, and this one I call diversion, is a cleverness of knowledge. Now, if you're being tested, or trying to be outwitted, or being psychologically manipulated, or being tested, like I said, tested, or any kind of way where they're trying to subdue or enchant you, or try to bring you into something, and then you become aware of it, and you use some knowledge you might have to stand for something, or not be swayed by what they're saying, and use a knowledge against them, and they either oppose it or view it as stupid. That's usually a telltale sign that you're pretty convinced with yourself, and you know what you're talking about. If you've studied something of the matter, and you're 100% sure of it, and they are trying to make you or belittle you or oppose your opinion, because it's a diversion technique. They're trying to take away from you your own belief, your own strength, your own self. Your own self awareness, and when you push them, like, especially if it's in spiritual matters, like, what are you? What is it that you want? Da 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 da. And they sway a conversation around. I mean, we're dealing with beings that are very much like a person, but in the spiritual world, it's like absolute darkness and absolute light, and then there's a middle ground of beings in between. So you got to know exactly what it is. You have to try to figure out what it is that you're dealing with, and make sure that your conviction is like a rock, like, and that's where faith comes in. It has to be a strong foundation. I got into mental emotional attacks. This is a way of oppression, to that something that weighs on you, or something that's close to your heart, or something that is a very real matter, and is used against you to make you feel bad, or of less worth, or no worth at all. Something that takes advantage of your emotions and causes fear and anxiety, and has a ploy of deception, and wants to make you feel horrible. That's where that antagonist comes into that I was talking about, and it's usually a something that tries to separate you from your reality, and what is real and what is not, and it can fatigue you. And the mental emotional attack, what it is draining you. I mean, you're spending energy on anguish, and that anguish is I don't want to say being absorbed or being used against you, but that is pretty much what these beings are trying to do. They're trying to cause anguish. A lot of evil entities and things in the darkness, they try to get an upper hand over you, to become tyrannical over you, and it's a very scary thing if you give them the power to do that. False self, that goes into that characterization thing, that characterization I was talking about, or the personality tweak. Some beings that give you enhancements to make you to have these things, and you believe yourself to be some sort of thing, and then you start building up this massive ego, and it's an attachment attunement, and then you're like, I am the greatest, I am the best, I'm this, I'm that. And all the time, it's enhancements of egotistical beings bringing you in with their lures and their enhancements, and their stuff that makes you feel self-gratified. That's why a lot of spiritual practices like meditation and mantras, and a lot of diligent and spiritual practices will, most of them tell you to start releasing the ego, and let go, and become more attuned with silence, and being still, and being aware and observant. That's why a lot of this is dealing with a hypercritical mind, and one who hasn't calmed their mind down enough to be able to meditate, or be able to make separation, and be able to still their mind, and know their own voice, their own self, their own I am of their own being, the being with the spirit within. So you gotta be careful of this, because it can get, it's not something that it can hurt you, but like I said, it's all a matter of care and concern. Impressions. Impressions are things that may scar you and leave a remnant of something behind in your brain that has either been a scarring moment or a spiritual design that will mark you with something that's a lasting reminder. That's a lasting reminder. And these impressions can, it can hurt in the long run, because you might think that you're the that impression is real, when you can go back and heal it and fix it. There's a lot of ways in healing and fixing in spiritual practices, and impressions can be good and impressions can be bad. It's like having your first impression with somebody, only on a spiritual way, like something that happens to you spiritually, and that has laid a root of something that is a reminder of something. For me, it was, I've been lied to too many times by spirits. That's my impression of them. And at this point, I don't give too many spirits chances to really get to deceive me, even if they are trying to help me. It's a good and it's a bad thing. But I've also learned to make separation to some degree, because there's when you become really awake and you become at least knowing to some degree, you're like a magnet, and they come, and that's that's part of what happens. I mean, when you're just living in a life, that's why all these books are coming out with universal laws and all this stuff. Your mind is a magnet for different things. You walk in like a big bubble of your own atmosphere. You walk in a big bubble of your own mental thought, and what you're thinking of can draw and attach things to you depending on where your thoughts are. If you're constantly negative and you're walking around negative, you're gonna draw negative beings from different places that like to feed on that. In my doctrine, it talks about you live and die by the sword, and that is to me that I've my own research is the sword is your word, your mental thought. You can either kill yourself or you can live. And if you start, that's why I pointed my sword upward with positive thoughts, with positive mantras, positive convictions, and I was able to reveal the enemies within my arena, and I learned to overcome a lot of them. And just like, when things are going bad, because it has happened, and I go downward, and I have that antagonist, and they latch on, and I just go in, and I start cursing, and I start feeling horrible, and I start feeling bad. It's like they'll just jump on it and make it a whole lot worse, and then that anxiety becomes anger, that anger becomes frustration, that frustration goes into something. So it's all catalyst, and that's why they talk about the positivity, the power of word. I'm a strong believer in the macro and microcosm. We're a microcosm of the grand creator. So if the word was creation, then our word is the creation or the destruction of ourselves. So that's leading into the last little bit of it. I have a whole lot more different kind of spiritual knowledges that I've witnessed and have some understanding of different things that have occurred within my own life that I could shed upon others. But like I said, I just wanted to bring this to your guys' attention, because I feel it's kind of it's my duty to help others where I may have I may have triumphed, and others may be lost somewhere in their conscious, and they don't know how to get out because they don't know a stratagem is being used on them. And it's a very, when you're dealing with conscious matter, spiritual conscious, to be specific, if you are trying to get yourself better in a spiritual conscious way, there's a lot of adversity. That's why it's highly in all religions, it talks in just about all of them, is centering yourself and calming your mind and becoming still. But this was for those who have a lot of, if you've encountered the enemy, or if you've noticed different things like this, or if you're in your own war and you want to learn how to try to overcome what you're going through. I just tried to label a couple names of the strategies they used against me. And I'm still here today. Uh, I'm a fallen, as I have fallen in my own way that I don't want to get into, and I don't know if I can return, but I would like to think one day I can. And it's in my hopes and my wishes that you maintain strength and be strong and have faith and conscience unshakable. And as words from the Lord, good war, and God bless you. Amen.